Sirius Black escapes, but Lily is ready. Watch Harry trade science for ancient blood magic to ruthlessly enslave Peter Pettigrew. The ultimate family revenge starts now. Hit subscribe, drop a like, and comment present to mark your attendance before we begin the hunt. The North Sea was not merely water. It was a liquid graveyard, vast, black, and unfeeling. Rising from its churning depths was the fortress of Azkaban, a jagged tooth of dark stone piercing the bruised sky. For 12 years, Sirius Black had existed within its walls, not as a man, but as a hollow vessel. The Dementors, sanctioned by the Ministry, fed on his despair, leaving him only the cold, jagged memories of the night he lost his brother in all but blood. He was innocent, a fact that had become both his shield and his torment. It was not a happy thought, so the Dementors could not take it from him, but it was a cold comfort in the dark. Everything changed on a Tuesday, when the Minister of Magic, Cornelius Fudge, made an inspection tour before his eventual ousting. Fudge had carelessly discarded a copy of the Daily Prophet outside Sirius's cell. Sirius, his fingers reduced to skeletal claws, reached through the iron bars and dragged the damp paper toward him. The headline did not matter. What mattered was the moving photograph beneath it. It was an image of the Wizengamot chambers in London. Standing at the central podium, radiating an aura of absolute, terrifying authority, was a woman. She wore an immaculate black suit, her dark auburn red hair pulled back tightly in a severe practical bun. Her emerald green eyes were sharp, intelligent, and fiercely alive. Lily. Sirius stopped breathing. The paper trembled in his hands. Royal Magical Auditor dismantles corruption, the caption read. Lily Potter, previously thought dead, purges ministry. She was alive. Lily was alive, and if Lily was alive, Harry was safe. But the realization that followed struck Sirius with the force of a physical blow. Peter Pettigrew was still out there. Peter, who had framed Sirius, who had sold James to the Dark Lord. If Peter saw this paper, he would know the hunt was not over. A primal, ancient magic, older than wands, older than the Ministry, ignited in Sirius's chest. It was the magic of the pack, the magic of a godfather's vow. That night, as the Dementors glided past his cell, bringing the familiar chill of the grave, Sirius did not cower. He embraced the madness. He let his human mind slip away, replaced by the simplified, instinctual consciousness of a massive black dog. The Dementors, blind and reliant on human emotions, glided past the simple animal mind. Padfoot slipped through the iron bars. He ran through the stone corridors, a shadow amongst shadows, until he reached the edge of the fortress. Below him, the icy sea roared. He jumped. The water was a physical agony, freezing him to the bone, but the dog swam. He swam with the desperation of a dying beast, guided only by the burning need to cross the ocean, to reach the shores of America, and to lay the truth at Lily's feet. The Berkshires in midsummer were sweltering, the air thick with the scent of baked pine and damp earth. Deep within the forest, the magically warded cabin stood as a sanctuary of intense discipline. Harry Potter, now 13 years old, stood in the center of a clearing, his lean, athletic build coiled with tension. He held his rigid American hornbeam wand. Last year, he had treated magic as a programmable physics engine. This year, Lily had stripped the Muggle logic away. Magic is not just a calculation, Harry, Lily called out from the porch, her green eyes tracking his movements. Physics can kill a beast, but it cannot stop a blood curse. It cannot shatter a soul binding. To fight ancient magic, you must tap into the ancient well. Stop thinking. Feel. Harry closed his eyes. He had spent his life building the White Room, the mental fortress his mother had taught him to compartmentalize pain and emotion.
Now she was telling him to open the door. The Patronus charm, the ancient wards, the shielding of the soul, these require a manifestation of raw emotional resonance, Lily instructed, stepping off the porch. Voldemort uses hatred and fear. They are volatile, corrosive fuels. We use something older. We use the blood. We use the pack. Harry lowered his wand. It goes against my training. Emotion compromises tactical clarity. A soldier without emotion is just a machine, and machines can be broken, Lily countered smoothly. She walked up to him, tapping the center of his chest. Your father didn't stand in front of the Dark Lord because it was tactically sound. He did it out of pure, overwhelming love. That love is a magical frequency. Find it. Harry took a deep breath. He gripped the hornbeam wand, feeling the low, vibrating energy of the smoke phoenix at its core. He didn't think about gravitational pulls or kinetic energy. He thought about the cabin. He thought of his mother standing before him. He thought of the safety they had forged in this secluded American woodland. He didn't cast a specific spell. He channeled the fierce, protective warmth from his chest down his arm. Pulse. A shockwave of pure, golden, magical energy erupted from his wand, rippling outward in a massive dome. It hit the tree line, illuminating the ancient runic carvings Lily had etched into the bark, making them flare with blinding light before settling into a deep, vibrating hum. Lily smiled, a fierce, proud expression. There is the Potter magic. The foundation is set. Now we build the armory.
The serenity of their training was shattered 3 days later. Lily stood in the gleaming Art Deco lobby of the Woolworth Building in New York City, the headquarters of the Magical Congress of the United States of America, MACUSA. She had been summoned for an emergency summit. Director Graves, the stern man with graying temples who oversaw magical law enforcement, looked deeply troubled as he projected a magical map of the Atlantic over his mahogany desk. The British ministry is in a state of absolute panic, Mrs. Potter, Graves said gravely. Sirius Black has escaped Azkaban. They believe he is highly motivated, highly dangerous, and tracking you. Interim Minister Bones has sent a formal request to extradite a battalion of Dementors to the eastern seaboard to hunt him. Lily's expression turned to ice. She wore her sharp, tailored Muggle suit, radiating the authority of her royal mandate. Denied, Lily said flatly. Graves sighed. Lily, this man is a convicted mass murderer. He was the secret keeper for your family. If he crosses our borders, if he crosses your borders, MACUSA Aurors will apprehend him, Lily interrupted, leaning over the desk. But you will not allow those soul-sucking parasites onto American soil. Azkaban's conditions are a gross violation of human rights. Dementors feed indiscriminately. If you unleash them in New York or Massachusetts, you will have a civilian casualty nightmare on your hands. Amelia Bones insists that Black is a threat to your son, Graves pressed. I am the Royal Magical Auditor, and my authority supersedes the interim minister's panic, Lily stated, her voice ringing with absolute finality. Send a diplomatic wire back to London. If a single Dementor crosses into MACUSA airspace, I will consider it an act of war against the Crown, and the sovereign magical accords will be suspended entirely. Do I make myself clear? Graves looked at the fierce, unyielding mother. He gave a stiff nod. The borders remain closed to the Dementors, but Lily, watch your shadows. If Black is coming for blood, wards alone might not stop him. Let him come, Lily said quietly, her green eyes flashing. I have a few questions for him myself. Back in the Berkshires, the heavy atmosphere of impending danger settled over the warded cabin. While Harry continued his brutal physical and magical conditioning, Lily turned the central wooden table into a war room of ancient magic.
The table was buried under mountains of legal scrolls, international magical treaties, and diplomatic dossiers. But among them lay something far older, the scorched, blood-sealed parchments of the original Order of the Phoenix. Harry walked in, wiping sweat from his brow. Perimeter wards are stable. Runic anchors are fully charged. What are you looking for, Mom? The anomaly, Lily murmured, tracing a complex, seven-pointed arithmantic star she had drawn on a massive piece of parchment. You're trying to reverse engineer the magical signature of the betrayal. Exactly, Lily said. She picked up a silver dagger and pressed the tip to her thumb, drawing a single drop of blood. She let it fall into the center of the arithmantic star. Blood calls to blood. Magic leaves an echo. When the Fidelius charm broke, the backlash of the betrayal scarred the magical ether. She chanted softly in ancient Gaelic. The drop of blood hissed, turning to black smoke that began to crawl across the parchment, seeking out the names written on the Order's roster. It bypassed Albus Dumbledore. It bypassed Lupin Remen. It approached the name Sirius Black and completely ignored it. Harry's breath hitched. It didn't react. The magic of the betrayal doesn't match his signature. The smoke crawled further, finally settling violently over a name near the bottom of the list. The parchment burned beneath it, smelling of sulfur and fear. Peter Pettigrew. The silence in the cabin was deafening. Lily stared at the burned name, her hands trembling. For 12 years, she had believed Sirius had sold them to Voldemort. She had believed her husband's best friend was a monster. Pettigrew, Harry said, his voice cold, devoid of inflection. The man Sirius allegedly blew up in the street, the man who was awarded the Order of Merlin. He framed him, Lily whispered, the realization crashing down on her. The grief and rage she had buried for over a decade erupted, a terrifying green aura flaring around her. "We don't need a legal precedent for this, Mom," Harry said, his emerald eyes boring into hers. "We just need a trap."
The storm hit the Berkshires 3 nights later, a torrential downpour that turned the forest into a howling abyss. Inside the cabin, Harry was awake. He sat in the dark, his hornbeam wand resting lightly across his knees. The magical tracking instruments Lily had arrayed around the room were silent, but Harry didn't need them. He felt it, a heavy, desperate presence pushing against the outer boundary of their ancient wards. Chime! The silver bell above the door rang, a single sharp note. The perimeter had been breached. Harry didn't run. He moved with the silent, lethal grace of a trained operative. He stepped out onto the covered porch, the rain lashing against his face. Standing at the edge of the clearing, illuminated by a flash of lightning, was a monster. It was a massive black dog, the size of a bear, its fur matted with mud and seawater. Its ribs showed starkly through its flanks. It looked half dead, but its pale, almost human eyes were locked onto Harry. The dog bared its teeth and took a step forward. Harry didn't draw his wand. He raised his open hand. He remembered his mother's lesson: emotion, pack, willpower. "Stop!" Harry commanded. He didn't shout. He laced the word with pure, dominating, magical intent. The air crackled. The dog hit an invisible wall of force and collapsed to the mud, whining, struggling to push forward. It wasn't fighting to attack. It was fighting to reach him. The heavy oak door of the cabin swung open. Lily stepped onto the porch. She took one look at the massive, starving beast in the mud, and her wand dropped to her side. "Release him, Harry," Lily said, her voice cracking. Harry dropped his hand. The dog didn't attack. It dragged itself forward on its belly, whining pitifully, until it reached the edge of the porch. Then the magic shifted.
The bones cracked and reshaped, the fur melted into filthy, ragged prison robes. Sir Sirius Black lay in the mud. He was a skeleton wrapped in pale skin, his long, matted hair obscuring his face. He looked up at Lily, his sunken eyes filled with tears. "Lily," Sirius choked out, his voice a raspy, broken croak. "Harry, you're alive!" Lily fell to her knees in the mud, regardless of the rain. She didn't hug him, not yet. She pulled a small vial of clear liquid from her pocket. "3 drops, Sirius," Lily said, her voice tight with unshed tears. "Standard Vericeratrum. If you are truly my pack, you will drink it." Sirius didn't hesitate. He opened his mouth, desperate for the truth to finally be known. Lily administered the drops. His eyes glazed over. "Did you betray James Potter to Lord Voldemort?" asked Lily, her voice echoing in the storm. "No," Sirius said, the potion rendering his voice hollow. "I convinced James to switch secret keepers to Peter. I thought it was the perfect bluff. I killed James." Lily closed her eyes, a sob tearing from her throat. "Is Peter Pettigrew alive?" she asked, the storm a chorus to her trembling question. "Yes," Sirius answered. "He is an animagus, a rat. He hid. I saw him in the paper. I came to protect you." Lily waved her hand, murmuring the counteragent spell. Sirius gasped, the clarity returning to his eyes. Before he could speak, Lily threw her arms around him, pulling the filthy, broken man into a desperate, crushing embrace. "I know, Padfoot," Lily wept into his shoulder. "I know. You're safe now. You're home." Harry stood on the porch, watching the reunion. The cold, analytical part of his mind was silent. The ancient magic in his blood was singing. The family was reunited, but the ledger was not balanced. He looked out into the dark, rainy woods, his emerald eyes hard as flint. The systemic audit was over. It was time for a reckoning. The storm broke by dawn, leaving the Berkshires washed clean, the air heavy with the scent of crushed pine and ozone. Inside the warded cabin, the atmosphere was thick with magic older and heavier than anything Harry had felt before. Sirius Black sat in an oversized armchair by the hearth, wrapped in thick woolen blankets. Lily had spent the night brewing aggressive restorative drafts, not the polite, measured potions taught at Hogwarts, but ancient, visceral concoctions of bicorn horn and phoenix ash, designed to forcibly stitch a shattered mind and starved body back together. Harry sat across from them, his rigid American hornbeam wand resting across his knees. He was watching his godfather. The man was a ruin of sharp angles and hollow cheeks, his gray eyes haunted by 12 years of waking nightmares. Yet, when Sirius looked at Harry, a flicker of fierce, unbroken fire danced in his gaze. "You look just like him," Sirius rasped, his voice sounding like dry leaves over stone. "But the eyes, Lily's eyes, and Lily's mind, I suspect. You subdued me in the mud without a single incantation. That wasn't just power, Harry. That was intent." "Harry has been trained to survive," Lily said quietly, handing Sirius a steaming mug of bone-knitting broth. She looked exhausted, the severe lines of her Royal Auditor persona stripped away, leaving only the fiercely protective mother and the grieving friend. "I was trained to analyze and neutralize," Harry corrected softly. "But analysis requires logic. What Peter Pettigrew did, it defies logic. Why betray the pack?" Sirius's hands shook around the mug. He closed his eyes, and for a moment the shadows in the room seemed to deepen. "Because he was a coward. But you must understand, Harry, the Marauders weren't just schoolboys playing pranks. We forged bonds in the Shrieking Shack that bordered on blood magic. To become an animagus at 15 requires a tether to your humanity, otherwise the beast consumes you. James was my tether. I was his. Peter, I spit the name like poison, used our magic to hide his weakness. When the Dark Lord offered him power, he didn't just break a promise, he tore a hole in the magical ether. He broke a blood oath. Harry leaned forward. The cold, scientific detachment he had relied on in his first 2 years was dissolving. In its place, a dark, heavy resonance was pooling in his chest. It wasn't the thrill of a puzzle. It was the ancient, undeniable call of a blood debt. He is living as a rat, a pet, owned by a boy in Arthur Weasley's household. For 12 years, he has slept in a warm bed while you rotted in Azkaban and James lay in the ground. Then we hunt him, Harry said, his emerald eyes devoid of their usual analytical calm. They were hard, flat, and burning with a green fire that mirrored his mother's. How? Sirius asked, offering a slow, jagged smile that bared his teeth like a wolf. We don't cross the ocean to catch a rat, Lily said, standing up. She walked to her desk, her auditor's signet ring gleaming in the morning light. We lay a trap, and we make the rat come to us.
Lily Potter did not wield her political power like a blunt instrument. She wielded it like a scalpel. As the Royal Magical Auditor, her authority over the British Ministry of Magic was absolute, backed by the ancient treaties of the non-magical crown. She could not simply order Aurors to raid the Weasley home. Arthur Weasley was a good man, and a sudden raid would cause panic, giving Peter the perfect opportunity to slip into the walls and vanish forever. Instead, Lily used bureaucracy, infused with subtle, binding magic. She sat in her office at MACUSA headquarters in New York 3 days later, drafting a transatlantic decree. Director Graves stood by the window, watching the magical skyline of the city. An international youth ambassador exchange? Graves read the parchment on her desk, raising an eyebrow. Lily, we are in the middle of an international crisis regarding an escaped mass murderer, and you are establishing a pen pal program? I am establishing an impenetrable snare, Director, Lily replied smoothly, signing her name with a flourish of emerald ink. The parchment glowed briefly, sealing the magic of the mandate. The British Ministry's reputation is in tatters after my audit. They need a diplomatic win. I am offering them one. I have requested that 2 students from Hogwarts be selected to tour MACUSA to foster international magical cooperation. Hermione Granger for her unmatched academic record, and Ronald Weasley for his family's long-standing, untainted service to the ministry. Graves frowned. And this accomplishes what exactly? A rat has a familiar, a garden rat, Lily said, her voice turning dangerously soft. By magical law, familiars are bound to the magical aura of their masters. Where the boy goes, the rat goes. If the boy is summoned to an international portkey, the rat will be pulled into the slipstream of the travel magic. Graves' eyes widened as he finally understood the play. The rat is Pettigrew. He's hiding in plain sight. And if we try to extract him in Britain, he will run, Lily confirmed. But if he is brought across the Atlantic, into the heart of MACUSA, surrounded by the strongest ancient wards on this continent, he will be completely cut off from his network. He will be trapped in a fortress. This is incredibly risky, Lily. If Pettigrew panics in the middle of our headquarters, he won't have time to panic because my son will be waiting for him. Across the ocean, an ornate, magically binding owl arrived at the burrow. Arthur and Molly Weasley were overjoyed at the immense honor bestowed upon their youngest son. Ron, bewildered but excited, packed his trunk, and tucked safely inside his pocket, sleeping fitfully,
was a rat with a missing toe, entirely unaware that a transatlantic summoning ritual had just locked its jaws around him. While Lily laid the political snare, Harry and Sirius were deep in the Berkshire woods. The magical climate had shifted. Though Lily had barred the Dementors from entering the United States, a contingent of them had gathered at the Canadian border, waiting like vultures. Their sheer numbers were causing unnatural frosts and a creeping, insidious dread that seeped down into Massachusetts. Sirius, having regained enough strength to stand without a cane, held a gnarled branch he was using as a focus channel. "The Patronus charm is not a shield charm, Harry," Sirius explained, pacing around the clearing. "It is not a calculation of kinetic energy or light refraction. The Dementor is a creature of pure, conceptual absence. It is the void. You cannot fight the void with math." Harry frowned, his hornbeam wand resting in his palm. "Every spell has a foundational structure, Sirius. If I can understand the arithmetic baseline of the charm, I can replicate it." "No!" Sirius barked, the sudden ferocity of the dog bleeding into his voice. He stepped close to Harry, tapping his chest. "That is how you fail. If you think, you die. A Dementor strips away your logic first. It leaves only your worst, most agonizing memories, your mother screaming, the green light." Harry flinched. The white room in his mind shuddered. To cast a Patronus, you must summon a memory so fiercely joyful, so steeped in absolute unconditional love that the void cannot consume it. It is ancient magic, Harry. It is the magic of the pack protecting its own. You must pull the love from your blood and force it into the world. Harry closed his eyes. He tried to think of a happy memory. Winning the Quidditch match? Defeating the basilisk? They were triumphs, yes, but they were rooted in conflict. They weren't pure. The air in the clearing suddenly dropped 10 degrees. Frost crept up the bark of the oak trees. A rogue Dementor had slipped past the border patrols, drawn by the residual trauma surrounding Sirius. The creature glided out of the shadows, towering and cloaked in rotting black fabric. The world went dark. Harry heard it instantly, the high, cold laughter of Voldemort, followed by the agonizing scream of his mother. Harry raised his wand, his hand trembling. He tried to calculate the spell. He tried to visualize the runic structure of the Expector Patronum incantation. Nothing happened. The Dementor drifted closer, a rattling breath echoing from beneath its hood. "Don't think," Harry told himself, panic clawing at his throat. "Feel." He abandoned the logic. He abandoned the white room. He let the walls crash down. He felt the terror, but beneath it, he searched for the anchor. He didn't think of a specific event. He thought of the feeling of Lily's hand smoothing his messy hair after a nightmare. He thought of the fierce, unyielding pride in her green eyes when he mastered a spell. He thought of Sirius, broken and starved, crossing an ocean just to make sure Harry was safe. He thought of his family. A well of ancient, molten warmth erupted in his chest. It wasn't polite. It was aggressive, possessive, and wildly powerful. "Expecto Patronum," Harry roared. He didn't cast the spell. He unleashed it. A blinding silver explosion erupted from the tip of the hornbeam wand. It didn't form a shapeless shield. The silver light condensed, solidified, and hit the ground with the force of a physical beast. A massive, ethereal creature made of pure, blazing starlight stood between Harry and the Dementor. It possessed the body of a great stag, but its antlers were sharper, its stance heavier. It was a guardian of ancient timber. The silver stag lowered its heavy antlers and charged. It struck the Dementor with the force of a battering ram, a silent explosion of light that banished the creature into the shadows, sending it fleeing back toward the north. The stag turned back to Harry. It bowed its head once, the light reflecting in Harry's awe-struck emerald eyes, before dissolving into a mist of silver sparks. Sirius shifted back into a man, clutching his ribs but laughing, a genuine barking laugh that chased away the remaining cold. "Prongs," Sirius whispered, tears shining in his eyes. "Your father's form, but heavier, fiercer. You did it, Harry. You tapped the ancient well." Harry lowered his wand, panting heavily. The analytical tactician was gone. He felt connected to the earth, to his blood, to the sheer, raw power of the wizarding world. "The rat," Harry said, his voice ringing with a new, dark resonance. "Is he coming?" "The portkey activates tomorrow," Sirius grinned. "The trap is set."
The main lobby of MACUSA was a testament to American magical grandeur, a cavernous space of shifting marble and enchanted skylights that reflected the weather of 100 different magical biomes. At precisely 10 a.m., a localized spatial rift tore open in the center of the arrival platform. Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger tumbled out, clutching a battered brass kettle that had served as their international portkey. "Merlin's beard!" Ron gasped, staring up at the towering golden statues and the hundreds of wizards bustling past in sharp, modern attire. "It's brilliant!" "It's architecturally fascinating," Hermione corrected, straightening her robes. "The spatial expansion charms alone must require a daily maintenance ritual." Lily Potter stood waiting for them, flanked by 2 MACUSA auras. She wore her dark suit, radiating a calm, welcoming authority. "Welcome to New York, Mr. Weasley, Miss Granger. I hope the journey wasn't too jarring." Ron's eyes went wide. "Professor Evans, Mrs. Potter, we didn't know you'd be here." "I arranged the program, Ronald," Lily smiled smoothly. "Please, follow me. We have a brief orientation in the upper archives before your tour begins." As they walked toward the enchanted elevators, Ron patted his pocket. "Settle down, Scabbers, you're fine." Deep inside Ron's pocket, Peter Pettigrew was not fine. For 12 years, his rat form had dulled his human senses, but his instinct for survival was sharper than ever. The moment he materialized in the Woolworth building, the air felt wrong. It was heavy with ancient warding magic. But worse than the wards was the scent. Through the thick layers of magical polish and polished marble, the rat's twitching nose picked up a scent that made his blood run cold. It was faint, masked by powerful concealment charms, but it was undeniable. Dog. Not just any dog. The grim, Sirius. And underneath the scent of the dog was something else, a sharp ozone-like predatory focus. It was the scent of Lily Potter. Peter realized with a jolt of pure animal terror that this was not an exchange program. It was a slaughterhouse, and he had just been walked through the front door. As the elevator doors opened to the 42nd floor, the Department of Historical Archives, a labyrinth of towering bookshelves and shifting corridors, Ron reached into his pocket to show Hermione a sneakoscope he had brought. It was the only opening Peter needed. With a frantic squeak, the rat bit down hard on Ron's thumb. "Ouch! Bloody hell, Scabbers!" Ron yelped, pulling his hand back. The rat launched itself out of the pocket, hitting the marble floor and scurrying toward the nearest enchanted ventilation grate with terrifying speed. "Scabbers! Come back!" Ron shouted, lunging forward. Lily held up a hand, stopping Ron in his tracks. Her green eyes were perfectly cold. She didn't look surprised. "Do not pursue it, Ronald. The archives are dangerous for those who do not know the paths." "But he'll get lost," Ron protested. "He is exactly where he is supposed to be," Lily said softly. She tapped a communication rune on her wrist. "Harry, the package is in the maze. You are clear to engage." The Department of Historical Archives was a sprawling, non-Euclidean space. The aisles of bookshelves shifted like a sliding puzzle, the architecture responding to the magical signatures of those within it.
Harry Potter stepped out from the shadows of a towering section on 17th-century blood curses. He wore dark, practical clothing, his hornbeam wand drawn. He didn't have his mother's tech or his muggle science gear. He didn't need it. He dropped to one knee and pressed his palm against the polished wooden floor. He closed his eyes, ignoring the physical dimensions of the room and focusing entirely on the magical ether. Fear, desperation, cowardice, the rat's emotional signature was a blazing beacon in the quiet archives. Harry stood up, his green eyes locking onto a narrow gap between two shifting bookcases. There. He moved with the silent, predatory grace Sirius had taught him in the woods. He didn't run, he stalked. Ahead of him, the rat was frantically navigating the maze. The rat could feel the walls closing in. The magic of the building was actively working against him, the aisles of bookshelves shifting, herding him toward the center of the archive. Peter tried to transform. He needed to be a man to cast a spell, to blow a hole in the wall and escape. But as he tried to access his magical core, a heavy, suffocating pressure slammed down on him. Anti-animagist wards. Lily had layered the 42nd floor with ancient runic traps designed specifically to lock a shapeshifter into their current form. Peter was trapped as a rat. He scurried into a dead end, a circular reading room with no exits. He spun around, his whiskers twitching frantically. Footsteps echoed softly from the corridor, slow, deliberate. Harry Potter stepped into the reading room. Peter looked at the boy. For a horrifying second, he thought James had risen from the grave. The messy hair, the stance, but the eyes, those cold, burning green eyes, were entirely Lily. Harry raised his wand. He didn't use a stunning spell. A stunner would just knock the rat out. He needed the man. "You hid for 12 years, Harry said, his voice echoing in the circular room. It wasn't the voice of a 13-year-old boy. It was the voice of a judge delivering a sentence. You let my godfather rot in hell. You sold my father's blood." The rat squeaked pitifully, backing up against the wall, rising on its hind legs and pressing its front paws together in a grotesque mimicry of begging. Harry felt no pity. He felt the ancient magic rising in him, the magic of the pack demanding justice. Harry didn't use a standard incantation. He used a piece of primal transfiguration magic Sirius had forced him to memorize, a spell designed to violently reject false forms. "Homo Force!" Harry shouted, slashing his wand in a jagged, violent arc. A flash of blue and white magic struck the rat. The transformation was not graceful. It was agonizing. The rat was thrown into the air, its body twisting and expanding unnaturally. Bones snapped and popped, elongating with a sickening crunch. Fur receded into pale, greasy skin. A heavy, sickening thud echoed through the room as a man crashed on the floor. Peter Pettigrew lay wheezing on the ground. He was a pathetic, groveling creature, balding and entirely devoid of dignity. He wore tattered, oversized clothes that had expanded with him. He looked up, terrified, his watery eyes locking onto Harry. "Harry, look at you. You look just like your father. James and I, we were best friends." Harry stepped forward, pressing the tip of his rigid hornbeam wand directly against Peter's throat. The wand hummed with lethal intent, a spark of golden magic burning at its tip. "Do not speak his name," Harry whispered, the temperature in the room plummeting, "or I will sever your vocal cords before I drag you to my mother." Peter whimpered, freezing entirely. From the shadows behind Harry, a massive black dog padded into the room. It growled, a sound that vibrated the floorboards, before shifting seamlessly into the gaunt, towering form of Sirius Black. "Hello, Peter," Sirius smiled, a terrifying, humorless expression. "It's been a long time. Let's go have a chat with Lily." The trap had snapped shut. The betrayer was caught. Now the true reckoning would begin.
Deep beneath the bustling, polished marble floors of the MACUSA headquarters lay the containment sublevels. There were no windows here, no enchanted skylights reflecting the New York weather. The walls were constructed of ancient, solid obsidian, etched with binding runes that predated the Salem witch trials. The air was heavy, smelling of cold stone and ozone. In the center of Interrogation Room 4, a man sat bound to a heavy iron chair. He was not restrained by ropes or chains, but by bands of glowing, crimson magical energy that wrapped around his wrists and chest. Peter Pettigrew trembled, his watery eyes darting around the dim room. His clothes hung loosely off his shrunken, rat-like frame. The heavy iron door groaned open. 3 figures stepped into the gloom. Lily Potter entered first. She no longer looked like the polished Royal Magical Auditor who commanded the Wizengot. She wore dark, simple robes, her green eyes burning with an ancient, predatory fire. To her right walked Sirius Black, his gaunt face set in lines of absolute feral hatred. He moved with a stiff, predatory grace, his gray eyes locked onto the man in the chair. Behind them stood 13-year-old Harry Potter. He held his rigid American hornbeam wand loosely at his side. His face was a mask of cold, unreadable calm. "Lily," Peter whimpered, his voice cracking. He strained against the magical bindings. "Lily, please, you have to understand. The Dark Lord, you don't know the things he threatened me with. He would have killed me." "He should have," Sirius snarled, his voice vibrating with a dark, guttural magic that made the obsidian walls hum. "You were our brother, Peter. You sat at our table. You held Harry when he was born." "I was weak," Peter sobbed, tears cutting tracks through the grime on his face. "I was always the weak one, Sirius. You and James, you were so strong. I just wanted to survive." "Survival at the cost of your pack is not survival," Lily said, her voice dropping to a lethal whisper. She stepped forward, pulling a small crystal vial from her robes. "It is parasitism, and parasites are excised." "No, Lily, please, don't kill me." "I am not going to kill you yet, Peter," Lily said. She grabbed his jaw with a grip like iron, forcing his mouth open. She tipped 3 drops of clear liquid onto his tongue. "I am going to hear you say it." Peter's eyes immediately rolled back, a glassy, empty look overtaking his terror. The Vericerissum took hold, stripping away his ability to lie, to deflect, or to hide behind his cowardice. "Did you seek out Lord Voldemort, or did he find you?" Lily asked, her voice echoing in the cold room. "I sought him out," Peter answered, in a hollow, monotone drone. "I passed him information for a year before the attack." Sirius let out a sound that was half sob, half growl. He took a step forward, his hands curling into fists. "Did you suggest the switch?" Lily asked. "Did you convince Sirius to make you the secret keeper?" "No," Peter droned. "Sirius suggested it. He thought it was a brilliant bluff. I only agreed. And then I went straight to the Dark Lord's camp in the forest. I told him where the cottage was. I told him the charm was broken." Sirius couldn't hold it back anymore. 12 years of dementors, 12 years of agony, 12 years of believing he was the sole reason his best friend was in the ground. It all erupted. With a roar of pure, wandless fury, Sirius lunged at Peter. He didn't use a spell. He relied on the raw, violent magic of the Black family line. He grabbed Peter by the throat, his magical intent manifesting as a crushing, localized gravity well around the traitor's neck. Peter gagged, his face turning purple, his eyes bulging as the magical pressure crushed his windpipe. "Sirius, stop!" Lily shouted, reaching for him, but the ambient magic radiating from Sirius was too hot, throwing her hand back. Sirius's eyes were wild, completely consumed by the blood debt.
He was going to snap Peter's neck. He was going to end it. Relatio. The spell was not shouted. It was spoken with precise, cutting clarity. A sharp silver whip of magic cracked through the air, striking Sirius's wrists. The shock waves severed the flow of his wandless magic, breaking the invisible grip on Peter's throat. Sirius stumbled back, gasping, turning his wild eyes towards the source. Harry stood a few feet away, his hornbeam wand raised, its tip glowing with residual silver light. The boy did not look angry. He looked utterly, terrifyingly calm. "What are you doing, Harry?" Sirius breathed, his chest heaving. "He sold your father. He is the reason you grew up hiding in the woods. Let me kill him." "If you kill him, Sirius," Harry said smoothly, "you give him exactly what he wants. You give him an end to his fear. You give him peace." "He deserves to die!" Sirius roared. "Yes, he does," Harry agreed, stepping into the center of the room. He looked down at the wheezing, gasping form of Peter Pettigrew. The sheer, calculated malice in Harry's green eyes terrified him far more than Sirius's rage ever could. "No," Peter whimpered. "No, you can't. The Dark Lord will know. He will read my mind." "Then we will ensure your mind is not your own to read," Lily said. She stepped forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with her son. The mother and son shared a look of total, absolute agreement. The Potter magic was not just protective, it was strategic. Lily looked at Sirius. "Harry is right, Padfoot. Death is too kind for a traitor. We are going to bind him to the pack forever."
The preparation took an hour. The magic they were about to perform was so ancient, so heavily regulated, that even within the walls of MACUSA, they had to cast localized dampening wards to hide the resonance from the American aurors above. An unbreakable vow was not a contract of the mind. It was a shackle on the soul. Lily drew a circle of complex, interlocking runes on the obsidian floor, using crushed silver and phoenix ash. She forced Peter to his knees in the center of the circle. The rat-faced man was weeping openly, broken by the sheer terror of what was coming. "Kneel, Sirius," Lily commanded. Sirius stepped into the circle and knelt opposite Peter. He looked at the man who had been his brother, his face a mask of cold stone. He extended his right hand. Peter hesitated, trembling violently. "Take his hand, Peter," Lily said softly, raising her wand, "or I will step aside, drop the wards, and let Sirius finish what he started." Whimpering, Peter reached out and grasped Sirius's hand. Harry stepped forward. He would be the bonder. It required a neutral party, someone sharing the blood of the wronged to weave the magic. He placed the tip of his rigid hornbeam wand directly over their clasped hands. "Will you, Peter Pettigrew, dedicate the remainder of your life to the destruction of the entity known as Lord Voldemort?" Lily asked, her voice carrying the weight of ancient law. Peter squeezed his eyes shut. "I will." A thin tongue of brilliant, blinding fire shot from the tip of Harry's wand. It wound its way around Peter and Sirius's clasped hands like a red-hot wire. "Will you," Lily continued, her green eyes boring into Peter's soul, "return to the shadows, seek out your former master, and serve as the eyes and ears of the Potter family, reporting his every movement, plan, and vulnerability to us?" "I will," Peter gasped. A second tongue of fire shot from Harry's wand, intertwining with the first, pulling tight against Peter's flesh. The magic burned, searing the vow into his magical core.
"And should the time come," Lily said, her voice dropping to a final deadly whisper, "will you position yourself to sabotage his resurrection, and will you protect the life of Harry Potter, even at the cost of your own?" Peter looked at Harry. He saw the cold emerald eyes of the boy who had spared him only to enslave him. He had traded one Dark Lord for an auditor who possessed a far more terrifying form of light. I will." The third and final tongue of fire erupted from the wand. It wrapped thickly around their hands, blazing with a blinding intensity before sinking directly into Peter's skin. The runes on the floor flared white, then burned to black ash. Harry lowered his wand. The ritual was complete. Sirius dropped Peter's hand in disgust, standing up and stepping out of the circle. Peter slumped forward, clutching his arm where the vow had sunk into his veins. He belonged to them now. If he ever attempted to betray them, if he ever withheld information, or if he raised a wand against Harry, the magic woven into his soul would instantly and agonizingly end his life. "You are a ghost, Peter," Lily said, looking down at him. "To the British ministry, you are a dead hero. To the Dark Lord, you are a loyal servant. But you and I know the truth. You are nothing but a tether. Go back to the shadows. We will be listening." 3 days later, the Grand Assembly Hall of the International Confederation of Wizards buzzed with a chaotic, tense energy. The hall, hosted within the MACUSA headquarters, was an amphitheater of floating podiums and enchanted acoustics. Representatives from 50 magical nations sat in the tiers, muttering to one another. At the center of the floor stood Interim Minister Amelia Bones of the British Ministry of Magic. She looked exhausted. The pressure of Sirius Black's escape, coupled with the systemic purge Lily Potter had inflicted upon her government, had pushed her to the brink. "The British Ministry demands the immediate cooperation of MACUSA. Sirius Black is a Class X threat. He is a mass murderer, a Death Eater, and a danger to the International Statute of Secrecy. We have tracked his magical signature to this continent. We demand extradition rights and the deployment of Dementors to American shores." "Denied," a crisp, commanding voice echoed through the hall. The heavy doors of the assembly swung open. Lily Potter strode in. She was flanked by MACUSA aurors, but she didn't need the escort. She commanded the room entirely on her own. Whispers erupted across the international delegates. The Royal Magical Auditor, the woman who had risen from the dead and broken the purest bloodlines in Britain. Lily stepped onto the central floor, facing Amelia Bones. "Mrs. Potter," Amelia said tightly, "this is a matter of international security. You cannot shield a criminal just because he was once your friend." "I am not shielding a criminal, Interim Minister," Lily said smoothly. "I am preventing an international incident by exposing a catastrophic failure of the British judicial system." Lily waved her hand. A massive floating pensieve basin was levitated into the center of the room by 2 MACUSA officials. Sirius Black did not receive a trial 12 years ago. He was thrown into Azkaban without the opportunity to present a defense under the assumption that he was the secret keeper for my family. This was a lie. She tapped her wand against the side of the pensieve. A massive 3-dimensional magical projection erupted from the silver fluid, filling the space above us. It was a memory. Not just any memory, but the magically verified, untamperable memory of the interrogation in the MACUSA dungeon. The entire assembly watched as the spectral projection of Peter Pettigrew, downed to the chair under the influence of Veritaserum, confessed to everything. They heard the betrayal. They heard the cowardice. They saw the truth of the Godric's hollow attack laid bare. Amelia Bones went completely pale, stepping back as she looked at the projection of the man who had supposedly died a hero. Merlin's beard, Pettigrew, he's alive. He was an unregistered animagus. Lily's voice cut through the stunned silence. He hid as a rat for 12 years. Sirius Black broke out of Azkaban not to serve Voldemort, but to hunt down the true traitor and protect my son. The French delegate stood up, outraged. And where is this Pettigrew now? We must have him for questioning. He escaped. Lily lied flawlessly, her expression turning somber. During our attempt to apprehend him, he utilized his animagus form to slip into the New York sewer system. MACUSA is currently conducting a search, but the rat has gone to ground. However, his presence and his confession have been logged and verified by American magical law. Lily turned her piercing green eyes back to Amelia Bones. The British ministry imprisoned an innocent man for 12 years, tortured him with soul-eating demons, and allowed a Death Eater to sleep in the bed of a ministry official's son. You do not have the moral or legal authority to demand anything, interim minister. Amelia Bones swallowed hard. The evidence was irrefutable. The magical signature of the memory was absolute. The British ministry had been humiliated again. "What is it you are asking for, Mrs. Potter?" the supreme mugwump asked from his high podium. Lily stood tall, the ancient magic of her cause radiating from her. "I demand the immediate, unconditional pardon of Sirius Black. I demand his name be cleared across all international borders, and I demand that the British Ministry of Magic formally apologize to the House of Black."
The vote did not take long. The International Confederation of Wizards, eager to distance themselves from the catastrophic incompetence of the British ministry, voted unanimously in favor of the Royal Auditor's demands. An hour later, Sirius Black stood on the steps of the Woolworth Building. He was out of the prison robes. He wore a sharp, tailored black coat provided by MACUSA. His hair had been trimmed, and while his face was still gaunt, the shadows of Azkaban were finally beginning to recede from his gray eyes. He looked up at the bright midday sun shining over New York City. He took a deep, shuddering breath of air that didn't smell of salt, despair, and death. He was free. Harry walked out through the brass doors, followed closely by Lily. Sirius turned to them. He didn't say anything. Words were entirely insufficient for the magnitude of what they had given him. He crossed the marble steps and pulled Harry into a tight, desperate hug, burying his face in the boy's messy black hair. Harry hugged him back. The cold, analytical tactician allowed himself a moment of genuine, fierce warmth. The pack was whole. Sirius pulled back, placing his hands on Harry's shoulders. "You're a terrifying wizard, Harry. You know that, right? James would have been proud, and probably a little frightened." "I am pragmatic," Harry said, a slight smile touching his lips, "and I protect what is mine." Lily stepped forward, placing a hand on Sirius's arm. "It's done, Padfoot. The ministry has recalled the warrant. The Dementors are pulling back. You are a free man." "Free." Sirius tested the word on his tongue, as if it were a foreign language. "It feels strange. I spent 12 years dreaming of killing the rat. Now that he's out there, running errands for us, I don't know what to do with myself." "You are going to take up the mantle of Godfather, Harry. Harry needs to learn the old magic. He needs to understand the dueling forms of the ancient houses. I can teach him precision, but you can teach him how to fight like a wolf." Sirius's eyes lit up, the familiar, reckless spark of the Marauder finally returning. He looked at Harry. "Oh, we are going to have fun." Harry adjusted his glasses.
I am prepared to optimize my combat efficiency, Sirius." Sirius laughed, wrapping an arm around Lily and Harry. For the first time in over a decade, the three of them stood together, unburdened by the shadows of the past. They had exacted their vengeance. They had cleared the name of the innocent. They had turned the betrayer into a weapon. "So," Sirius said, looking out at the city, "what's the next move, Auditor?" Lily looked toward the east, across the Atlantic Ocean, toward the rolling hills of Scotland. The political rot in the ministry had been excised. The basilisk was dead, but the castle still held its secrets, and the Dark Lord was still gathering his strength in the shadows. "We return to Hogwarts," Lily said, her green eyes narrowing with anticipation. "We finish the school year. We prepare the ground. The Marauders are back, Sirius. It's time to show Voldemort exactly what happens when he threatens our family." The snare had been set. The ancient magic had been invoked. Harry Potter touched the hornbeam wand in his pocket, feeling the steady vibrating pulse of the phoenix feather. The boy who lived was gone. The architect of the Dark Lord's demise was ready to return home. The spring term in Hogwarts was rapidly approaching, but the warded cabin in the Berkshires remained a battleground. Harry stood in the snow-dusted clearing, his breath misting in the freezing air. Across from him stood Sirius Black. The gaunt, haunted prisoner of Azkaban was fading, replaced by the lethal aristocratic heir of the noble and most ancient house of Black. He held a wand Lily had procured for him, a dark, unyielding length of black walnut. "Again," Sirius barked. Harry raised his hornbeam wand. He cast a perfectly structured shield charm, a shimmering dome of blue magic. Sirius didn't cast a spell to break it. He slashed his wand diagonally, an ugly, jagged movement, and let out a roar. A wave of dark, concussive force tore through the clearing. It didn't just hit Harry's shield, it shattered the magical structure entirely, throwing Harry backward into a snowbank. "Precision is for healing, Harry," Sirius shouted, stalking forward, his gray eyes wild with the thrill of the duel. "Your mother taught you to build a fortress. I am going to teach you how to burn one down. House Black does not parry, we consume. Get up!" Harry pushed himself out of the snow, his muscles aching. He looked at his godfather. The cold, analytical part of his mind wanted to calculate the trajectory of the curse, but he remembered the lesson of the Patronus. This wasn't math, this was war. "You're holding back," Sirius taunted, circling him. "You're thinking too much. When the Death Eaters come for you, they won't be using standard curriculum hexes. They will be trying to rip your soul from your body. Give me your wrath, Harry. Give me the wolf." Harry closed his eyes. He stopped trying to filter the magic through his mind and let it pool in his chest. He thought of the 12 years Sirius had lost. He thought of the rat sleeping comfortably while his family bled. A dark, heavy heat began to radiate from his core. Sirius lunged, casting a localized, blistering curse of archaic fire. Harry didn't conjure a shield. He met the attack head-on. He whipped his hornbeam wand forward, not with a precise incantation, but with a guttural, furious shout. Crack! A blinding arc of raw emerald green magic erupted from Harry's wand. It collided with Sirius's fire, devouring it instantly, and struck the ground at Sirius's feet. The earth exploded, sending a shockwave of dirt and snow into the air, knocking the older wizard off his feet. Sirius landed flat on his back, staring up at the gray sky. Silence fell over the clearing. Harry lowered his wand, panting heavily, suddenly horrified that he had lost control. "Sirius!" Suddenly a loud barking laugh echoed from the crater. Sirius sat up, wiping a smear of mud from his cheek. His eyes were shining with absolute, unfiltered pride. "That's it," Sirius grinned, his teeth flashing white against the grime. "That is the Potter fury mixed with the black blood. They're not going to know what hit us, Harry. The Dark Lord is going to choke on us." Standing on the porch, Lily Evans watched the two of them. She held a cup of tea, her green eyes sharp and approving. The tactician had become a warrior. The pack was ready.
The Hogwarts Express was a stark contrast to the vast open magic of the United States. It felt archaic, slow, and undeniably British. Harry sat in a compartment with Ron and Hermione. Ron was still reeling from his abrupt, terrifying trip to New York. He sat staring at his empty hands, processing the fact that his childhood pet had been a dormant Death Eater. "He slept on my pillow, Harry," Ron whispered, his face pale. 12 years. He was just waiting." "He was a parasite, Ron," Harry said, his voice carrying a calm, heavy resonance. "And now he is chained. You were not at fault. The magic of a coward relies on deception." Hermione looked at Harry. She noticed the change in him. The boy who had logically dismantled a troll and calculated the basilisk's vision was gone. In his place sat a young lord. His posture was different, predatory, relaxed, yet vibrating with latent power. When they arrived at the Great Hall for the start-of-term feast, the whispers were deafening. The Daily Prophet had covered the ICW summit extensively. Everyone knew. Sirius Black is innocent. Peter Pettigrew was the traitor. The Potter family brought the ministry to its knees. Harry walked to the Gryffindor table. He felt the eyes of the staff upon him. Dumbledore looked at him with a profound, unreadable sorrow. Severus Snape looked as though he had swallowed glass, his eyes darting to the entrance hall as if expecting Sirius Black to burst through the doors. Draco Malfoy, sitting at the Slytherin table, looked terrified. With his father in a ministry holding cell pending the Royal Auditor's financial investigations, Draco was stripped of his armor. As Harry sat down, Malfoy tried to salvage his pride. "Think you're special, Potter?" Draco sneered across the aisle, though his voice lacked its usual venom. "Because your mother threw a tantrum at the ICW?" Harry didn't draw his wand. He didn't raise his voice. He simply turned his head and looked at Draco. He didn't use logic to humiliate the boy. He let a fraction of the raw, heavy magic he had learned from Sirius bleed into the air. The temperature around the Slytherin table plummeted. The silver goblets frosted over. "Watch your tongue, Malfoy," Harry said softly, the words carrying an unnatural, echoing weight, "or I will have my mother freeze the rest of your family's vaults, and you can learn to scrub your own cauldrons. The era of pure-blood immunity is over. Adapt or disappear." Draco went paper white, shrinking back into his seat. The rest of the hall fell completely silent. The boy who lived had returned, but he was no longer a symbol. He was a force of nature.
The term progressed with an eerie calmness. With the Dementors banished from the continent and Sirius cleared, the heavy dread that normally hung over Hogwarts was absent. Harry threw himself into his studies, integrating his new, aggressive magical channeling with the strict discipline his mother required. It was during the final week of exams that the timeline fractured. Harry did not take divination. He considered the subject mathematically flawed and relying too heavily on interpretation. However, he had agreed to meet Hermione at the base of the North Tower after her exam to exchange arithmancy notes. He was leaning against the stone wall when Professor Trelawney descended the spiral staircase. She looked different. Her usual hazy, fraudulent demeanor was gone. Her body was rigid, her eyes rolled back into her head, and her jaw was locked. Harry instantly recognized the magical resonance. It wasn't a parlor trick. It was a true, localized prophetic event. The ambient magic in the corridor grew heavy, tasting of copper and old dust. Trelawney did not speak in her usual misty voice. A harsh, booming, ancient tone ripped from her throat. "The Dark Lord lies alone and friendless, abandoned by his followers." Harry stepped forward, his hand dropping to his hornbeam wand. He committed every syllable to his perfect, trained memory. The servant was meant to break his chains, to set out and rejoin his master, but the timeline is shattered, the rat is shackled, the servant is bound by the blood vow to the mother. The air grew freezing cold. Trelawney's head snapped toward Harry, though her eyes were completely white. Denied his prophesied servant, the master wanders in the dark. He shall not seek the flesh of the willing. He shall turn to the forgotten crypts. The ancient rot will be awakened. The shadows beneath the earth will hear his call, and a power older than the founders will rise to claim the boy. Trelawney gasped violently, collapsing against the stone wall. She blinked, her thick glasses askew, returning to her normal, bewildered self. "Oh dear, my head. Mr. Potter, have you been waiting long? I felt a sudden dizzy spell." "No, Professor," Harry said, his voice entirely devoid of emotion, though his heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. "I just arrived." He didn't wait for Hermione. He turned and sprinted toward the Muggle Studies classroom. He burst through the doors. Lily was grading papers at her desk. She looked up, instantly sensing the shift in his aura. "Prophecy," Harry said, closing and locking the door with a wave of his hand. "A true seer event. We altered the timeline, Mom. By chaining Peter, we denied Voldemort his canonical path to resurrection." Lily stood up, her expression hardening. A desperate parasite is a dangerous thing. What did she say? "He's not going to use a potion. He's not going to use a servant." Harry relayed the prophecy verbatim, his analytical mind dissecting the ancient words. The forgotten crypts, the ancient rot. He is going to seek out a different form of ancient magic, something older than Hogwarts. Lily looked out the window toward the dark expanse of the Forbidden Forest. They had taken Voldemort's most loyal servant and turned him into a weapon. But in doing so, they had backed a cornered beast into a darker, unknown corner. "Let him dig," Lily said, her green eyes burning with cold anticipation. "We have the intelligence network. Peter will report to us the moment Voldemort makes contact. We hold the high ground, Harry." We are no longer preventing a resurrection, Harry realized, the weight of the war settling over his shoulders. We are baiting one. The end of the year did not culminate in a frantic dash through the castle, nor a desperate battle for survival. For the first time since Harry had entered the wizarding world, the term ended in total, absolute victory. The Hogwarts Express was waiting at Hogsmeade Station, billowing white steam into the warm June air. Harry stood on the platform. He wore a dark, tailored jacket over his clothes, standing tall and unbothered. Beside him stood Sirius Black, looking vibrant, handsome, and entirely whole, wearing the heavy signet ring of the House of Black on his right hand. To his left stood Lily, the architect of their triumph. Albus Dumbledore approached them, his long silver beard swaying in the breeze. He looked at the family that had completely rewritten the rules of his war. "You have accomplished something remarkable, Lily," Dumbledore said quietly, his blue eyes lacking their usual twinkle. "But I must caution you against the path you have chosen with Peter Pettigrew. An unbreakable vow used for slavery. It is dark magic. It leaves a stain on the soul." Lily looked at the old wizard. She respected him, but she no longer deferred to him. "My soul is perfectly intact, Albus," Lily said smoothly. "I did not enslave a man. I placed a collar on a rabid dog. I fight my war with second chances and forgiveness. I fight mine with absolute consequences. Voldemort will not find a forgiving light when he returns. He will find an executioner's block." Dumbledore sighed, a heavy, tired sound. "I only hope the darkness you are willing to embrace does not consume the light you are fighting to protect." "We are the light, Professor," Harry said, his voice ringing with absolute certainty. He looked at Dumbledore with his piercing green eyes. "But light doesn't just illuminate, it burns." Dumbledore nodded slowly, acknowledging the undeniable power of the young lord before him. He turned and walked back toward the castle. The train whistle blew. "Ready to go home, Harry?" Sirius asked, throwing an arm around his godson. "I have a house in London, Grimmauld Place. It needs a bit of a cleaning, but it's heavily warded. Or we can go back to the Berkshires." "We go to London," Harry said, looking at his mother. "The audit isn't over. We need to consolidate our power in the Wizengot before the Dark Lord makes his move." "Agreed," Lily smiled, a fierce, beautiful expression of total victory. "The Marauders have returned. Let the shadows tremble." They boarded the train together. Harry looked out the window as the castle of Hogwarts faded into the distance. The 3rd year was over. The traitor was chained. The godfather was free. The pack was united. Harry touched the rigid hornbeam wand in his pocket. He was no longer a child hiding from a legacy, nor a student surviving by the skin of his teeth. He was Harry Potter, the heir of a bloodline forged in ancient magic and righteous vengeance. And when the Dark Lord finally emerged from the earth, he would not find a boy who lived. He would find a predator waiting in the dark. End of Year 3. That wraps up Year 3. Peter is chained, Sirius is free, and the Potter family just rewrote the rules of revenge. But I want your honest opinion. Did Harry and Lily go too far by using dark magic to enslave Pettigrew? Let me know your thoughts down below. Now I need your orders for the next video. Comment Year 4 if you want to see this ruthless Harry completely break the Triwizard Tournament, or comment New if you want a brand new what-if scenario. The majority rules, so cast your vote and don't forget to subscribe.